Okay.
Who's there? Speak up, I can't hear you. Harper Lee, and she's not here. She's dead. They carted her away this morning. I told them at the desk not to let anybody in here. Who the hell are you? Oh, a college student, from the University of Alabama. Well, Harper never made it through there. But you're writing a term paper about her. Well, I can't help you. I only knew her a little bit. She was just an average Joe, nothing special. What's that about your grandmother? Speak up, I can't hear you. She grew up with Harper. What was her name? Sylvia Parnell. Is she still alive? Isn't that something? So you're Sylvia's granddaughter. Well, what's your name, honey? Sarah. Nice to meet you, Sarah. Well, come in. Sit down. Yeah. So, how's Sylvia doing? Well, I'm glad to hear she's doing well. She still play a mean trumpet? Oh, gives lessons. Good for her. Yeah, she was always so pretty. Well, all right, you guessed it. Harper Lee is not quite dead. Don't get excited, honey. There's not much left of me. Let's talk about something else. What are you studying at college? You want to be a writer, huh? Well, good luck with that. Advice? You're asking the wrong person. I only wrote one book and I couldn't do it again. And I don't do interviews. There, now, child, don't get upset. I'm telling you, my life is not that interesting. You didn't miss much. Lord have mercy, child. You're like a dog with a bone. Damned if I know what inspired me to write To Kill a Mockingbird. Well, if you must know, it all began when a strange boy moved to town named Truman Capote. My mama dropped me off in Monroeville, Alabama, while she went up to New York for some beauty contest she'd won. She said she wasn't ready to be a mother. Well, I was howling like a banshee when I heard a knock at the window. There stood a scrawny little girl in torn overalls. What's wrong with you? I want my mama. Well, where is she? Gone. It's too bad. Where's your daddy? I don't know. He disappeared. Want to go catch some frogs? I'm afraid of frogs. Well, what kind of boy are you? A gentleman. That why you're wearing that funny looking white suit? It's cooler in the heat. You're a poor excuse for a girl in those dirty overalls. I hate all that dumb girl stuff. Want to come in for some lemonade? That was the beginning of a lifelong friendship. Well, not quite lifelong. Truman moved in next door in 1932. He was 8 and I was 6. There was nothing to do in that old town. We had no library, no toys. So to pass the time, we used to sit up in the tree house my daddy made me. We'd go on for hours spinning tales about everybody in town. My father, Amasa Coleman Lee, better known as AC, could do just about anything. He was a lawyer, a newspaper editor, and a state senator. Sometimes Truman and I would go downtown to the courthouse and watch him defending people. And then afterwards, we'd go across the street to Mr. Jennings' drugstore for an ice cream cone. He always gave us an extra scoop. That was our big excitement for the week. It was in the treehouse I told Truman about the town hermit, son Bolaware. People said he got in trouble in high school for breaking a window with a slingshot, and the judge was going to send him to jail. But his father told the judge, give son to him, and he'd make sure he never broke the law again. After that, son was rarely ever seen. We used to run by his house, afraid he'd come out and grab us. People said he used to snatch squirrels out of the trees and eat them raw. One day, my daddy came home with a surprise. He pointed to a big box on the dining room table. It's for you and Truman, Dodie. Oh, Dodie was my nickname in the family because Nell Harper was just too long a name for a little girl. When I opened it, I gasped. It was a typewriter, Underwood number 5. After that, Truman and I started typing up all the stories we'd write together. The first one was called The Fire and the Flame. I showed it to my mama, but all she said was, that's nice, Dodie. Now I gotta go lay down. So I waited for AC to come home, and he told me it was first rate, and then he scooped me up in his arms and gave me a big hug. The next month, Truman wrote a story about my mama. It was called Old Mrs. Busybody. He sent it to the Mobile Register and they published it. In it, he told how my mama used to yell at people on the street, how she'd play the piano all day long, and how once she tried to drown me in the bathtub. What a liar! After that, I didn't speak to Truman again for a long time. Once I asked my father, AC, why doesn't my mama like me? Oh, your mama loves you, Dodie. She just doesn't feel good a lot of the time. That's why I hired Hattie Bell to look after you. Hattie Bell was this real nice colored lady. She loved me like a mama and tried to make sure I was raised right. That was a tall order. Honey child, you look like something the cat dragged in and forgot to lick. Take off those dirty overalls and come in here and make yourself presentable for dinner. You need a bath. Then she put me in the tub and scrubbed the dirt off my elbows with some kind of vegetable brush and perfume soap. I went along with it. Otherwise, I wouldn't get any of her famous sweet potato pie for dessert. Sometimes when AC had to work late, Hattie Bell would put me to bed. We'd sit together in the dark and she'd hold my hand and tell me stories of her people in the old days back on the plantation. I never wanted those stories to end. Eventually, I forgave Truman when he invited me to his Halloween party. It was the biggest thing to ever hit Monroeville. He had all these games set up in the backyard. You had to put your hand in a box and guess what was inside. One had a terrapin turned on its back. Another had a glob of mashed up bananas and oranges. Truman was dressed like Fu Manchu with a horsehair pigtail in his face painted yellow. I painted my face yellow too to match his. Well, he had this big landing strip set up for his tri-motor pedal airplane. We took turns making it fly. So I was out back playing with the model airplane when I heard Sook screaming. I ran around front and there were some men in sheets telling Sook they'd heard there were colored people here. And they said if she didn't tell them where they were going to burn the house down. Well, Sook was crying and Truman was shaking like a little girl. Then the men in the streets ran around the back and they started ripping off kids' costumes. They came to this one boy dressed like a robot with a box on his head. They yanked off the box. And who was it but son Bolaware? I wondered how he ended up there. Just then, AC came wading through a sea of people. He stood right in front of the leader and yanked off his hood. Who was it but Mr. Jennings from the drugstore? AC told him, you ought to be ashamed scaring little children like that. Get out of this house, get out of this yard right now. And they listened to him. And they turned around and left. At that moment, I thought my father was the bravest man who ever lived. Once I asked him, AC, why don't those men in sheets like colored folks? Well, they don't know any better than to hate. Then he told me how before I was born, he defended a colored man who was accused of killing someone. AC said he was real sorry he couldn't get him off because he thought he was innocent. Seemed like colored folks were always getting in trouble for something around Monroeville, like Walter Letts. They hung him too because a white lady said he did something bad to her. AC said she was most likely lying. Well, right after that, Truman's mama sent for him and he went up to New York City to live with her. But when he come back for the summer, we'd keep right on writing together. Once he told me he was going to become a writer, and I said I was too. Only when it came time for college, I wanted to make AC proud, so I ended up going to Huntington College for Women. Damned if I know how I managed to pledge a sorority. I wore men's green striped pajama pants and my brother's white shirts. I wasn't real popular with my sorority sisters or anybody else for that matter. In fact, at the end of the first semester, I was kicked out of the house for swearing. I called AC. Get me out of this goddamn place. Well, honey, what's wrong? Spare me the prison of pink petticoats. But Dodie, it's a good school. Then I pulled my ace. Yes, but I want to go to the University of Alabama and study law like you. What could he say? So off I went to the big university in Tuscaloosa with all kinds of smart people. Oh, your grandma was already there. Somehow that first year I didn't manage to take any law classes, but I did manage to become the editor of the college literary magazine, Rama Jamma. Oh, Red was the circulation editor. Red, your grandfather. They don't call him that anymore? Oh, yeah, I guess his hair isn't still red. Well, he and your grandma were already married. I remember this one time she showed up to a shipwreck party after a football game wearing nothing but his pajama top. And when the team came in, she jumped up on that table with her trumpet and tooted out when the Saints come marching in. She was a pistol. Ask her if she remembers that. I applied to be a part of an exclusive writing workshop taught by a popular English teacher named Hudson Strode, but I guess he didn't take a liking to the play I wrote, lampooning Alabama laws that were unfair to colored people, because I was not accepted into his workshop. But I got even by writing a character sketch about him in Rama Jamma, making fun of his phony English accent. AC kept on asking me when I was going to take some law classes. So finally, my junior year, I enrolled in some. Try as I would and hard as I studied, I just hated law. AC tried to bribe me to stick it out by sending me on a trip to England that summer. But somehow, seeing Jane Austen's house and the homes of other famous authors, it made me even more determined to become a writer. I told AC, I want to become the Jane Austen of South Alabama. Well, that's not likely, honey, and the law is a sure thing. My sister Alice, who was 15 years older than me, was already AC's law partner, and he had a seat waiting for me in his office. But Truman was up in New York, and he'd already had a book published called The Grass Hop, and he was working on a Broadway show. He called me. Now, you've just got to get out of that country bumpkin college and come to New York. I've never even graduated from high school, and I'm having fabulous success. Yeah, but Truman, I don't have any money. Oh, don't worry. I'll help you. I know people who know people. I'll help you get a job. Yes, but AC would be furious with me if I drop out of college. Well, is it his life or yours? If you don't take a chance, you'll never know if you could have made it. But I don't know anybody in New York. I'll introduce you. Well, the other night at Sardi's, I met Elizabeth Taylor and Frank Sinatra. Oh my goodness, what were they like? Oh, honey, I could tell some tales. Do tell, only if you move to New York. Well, and recently at a writers' conference, I met Carson McCullers. Carson McCullers, I loved Hard is a Lonely Hunter. You're better than she is. Oh, Truman, you're gonna turn my head. So finally, Finally, I gathered up my courage and called AC. But honey, you only have one semester to go. See it through. No, AC, I can't stand it. I want to try to become a writer. You want to write? Stay here. I'll get you a job on the paper. I'm going to New York. That's a big place. A lot of folks up there want to become writers, I imagine. Well, Truman has done it. Lightning doesn't strike twice. It could. Truman says he knows people. He's going to help me. Now, Harper, I'm willing to pay for your college education, but I am not willing to fund this crazy idea of yours. That's all right. I'll get a job. Doing what? I don't know. Honey, if you just wait a few more months, you'll have a college degree to fall back on. You can practice law. I guess I like taking risks. So the next week, AC drove me to the train station, and I left Alabama, and I never looked back. Truman picked me up at Grand Central Station. He helped me find an apartment, a one-room walk-up at 82nd in York, but it was all mine. Then he took me to Saudi's, and I saw famous celebrities like Mary Martin and Ethel Merman. Truman knew them all and introduced me. I told AC, I just know I made the right decision. Even though I'd wanted to escape Monroeville, for some reason, I kept writing stories about my hometown and all the strange people there. But I never seemed to have enough time to finish anything. I worked in a bookstore, and then I got a job for the airlines. I remember this one Christmas, they wouldn't give me enough time off to go home for the holidays. Luckily, by that time, I'd made some good friends named Michael and Joy Brown. I babysat for their boys. Michael was a talented composer who was having great success in New Faces of 1952. They invited me over for Christmas. On Christmas morning, I gave them my meager presents, and Michael pointed to an envelope on the tree with my name on it. When I opened it, I damn near passed out. They had given me a huge check. Joy smiled. Now you can take a year off and write. I don't know what to say, but thank you, but you're taking a huge risk. Michael hugged me. No, it's not a risk, honey. It's a sure thing. So I spent the next year doing nothing but writing. I got some stories together and I dropped them off for an agent named Maurice Crane. I thought they'd end up in the trash. No one was more surprised than I was when he called and said he liked them. He got me a contract with some publishers called Lippincott. Really, To Kill a Mockingbird was just a bunch of short stories then. So they assigned me to an editor named Tay Hohoff. Tay was like my guardian angel. With her help and guidance, the book started to take shape. I rewrote it 5 more times. It only took 8 years. Finally, Tay was satisfied, and she told me that To Kill a Mockingbird was going to be published in July of 1960. Well, I just hope it dies a quick and merciful death, I joked. I think you'll be surprised. You know, Tay, I want to use the name Harper Lee on the book. Just drop the Nell. Why is that? I don't want people mispronouncing it and calling me Nellie. And besides, the book will sell better if people think the author is a man. Harper Lee. It has a ring to it. So I was just sitting around waiting for the book to be published when Truman called. Now, have you heard about those awful murders out in Kansas? No. Well, everybody's talking about it. This wealthy farmer named Herbert Clutter and his wife and 2 children were brutally murdered. No one knows who did it. Oh, that's terrible. The thing is now, the New Yorker wants me to write an article about it, maybe even a book. But they want me to go to some godforsaken town called Garden City, Kansas, where it happened, and interview people, see what I can find out. Well, why are you telling me this? Because I want you to help me write it. Me? Yes, come out to Kansas with me. Help me interview people. It would be so great to write a book together with my old friend. Kansas in the dead of winter? Oh, come on now. Say yes. I never could say no to Truman. So before I knew it, we were headed out to no man's land. We arrived just before Christmas after an interminable train ride. Truman was decked out in full Western gear, sheepskin coat, full-length scarf, moccasins, and a cowboy hat. People backed away when they saw him. We checked into the only place in town, the Warren Hotel, and tried to get interviews. Our first one was with Detective Alvin Dewey of the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. I have to admit that man was just plain handsome. Unfortunately, I noticed a wedding ring on his finger. He ushered us into his office. Let me see your press pass, Mr. Capote. It's Capote, and another journalist. I'm writing an in-depth piece on the case, maybe even a book. I don't care if it's ever solved or not. We were quickly escorted out of the office. We walked around town trying to get interviews with people, but mostly we got the cold shoulder. Not only were people afraid because a horrible crime had been committed in their hometown, but they were also afraid of Truman. He always was uppity, and this time was no exception. I mean, we got so many doors slammed in our face, Truman was ready to give up. I told him, we will penetrate this place. Finally, I managed to get a few interviews with friends of the children, Nancy and Kenyon Clutter. I learned that Mrs. Clutter had mental problems and rarely left the house. I wrote up character sketches of each of the Clutters, and Truman said they were good. Finally, we got somewhere. Mr. Clutter's attorney, Cliff Hope, agreed to let us tour the Clutter home. We walked from room to room, trying to imagine the last hours of that poor family. I took so many notes, I didn't even know what I was writing. Trying to envision it, hating to envision it, wondering all the time, why? On Christmas Eve, I was typing up my description of the Clutter's last hours on Earth when the phone rang. It was Cliff Hope. He invited Truman and me to dinner with him and his wife at the home of Detective Alvin Dewey. I called Truman, get dressed. This is our big chance. Oh, I don't know now. I'm in my pajamas. It's snowing outside. Get dressed, Miss Sissy Britches. We can't miss our big chance. Well, we had a great time. Detective Dewey's wife, Marie, was Southern, and we hit it off right away. Truman regaled everyone with stories of all his celebrity friends, fueled by a bottle of J&B he'd brought along. At the end of the evening, we were all fast friends. Truman was calling Detective Dewey Foxy, and Detective Dewey called him partner. Right after that, we got an interview with the coroner, and then we were invited back to the Deweys for dinner 3 days later. Marie and I were in the kitchen enjoying some girl talk when the phone rang. A few minutes later, Al rushed into the kitchen. They found the killers out in Las Vegas, two ex-cons named Richard Hickok and Perry Smith. Al took off for Las Vegas, and Truman and I tried to interview people while we waited for him to return. Finally, Al got back with the killers, and we and everybody else in town waited at the courthouse to see them arraigned. Hickok was a tall man whose face had been misshapen due to a car accident. Perry Smith was short with jet black hair. Truman paid them $50 for an interview, and I tagged along. Turns out they broke into the Clutter house to rob them, but decided to kill them so there'd be no witnesses. I wrote down everything they said, typed it up, and then Truman and I went back to New York City. But we dragged ourselves out there again a few months later for the trial and got to hear them being sentenced to death. Truman cried on the train on the way back. I liked Perry. He was a nice boy and handsome. Oh, Truman, you have the worst taste in men. But now, don't you think he's attractive? Cold-blooded killers are not my type. But Truman kept pounding away for him. He even went back for the hanging. He claimed he needed to do more research for his book. Better. That spring, I presented Truman with 150 pages that I'd written for a book, which he was now calling In Cold Blood. Oh, yeah, this is wonderful. We should write more books together. But by that time, To Kill a Mockingbird was getting ready to be published. Truman had read it, and he was encouraging. He even showed me a letter that he'd written to his friend, the famous actress Jennifer Jones. I predict that To Kill a Mockingbird will be a great success. I'm in it as a character called Bill, the author being a childhood friend. Well, I just hope somebody beside Truman would like it enough to give me a little encouragement. Early signs were good. The Literary Guild chose it as a featured selection, and Reader's Digest made it into a condensed book. To Kill a Mockingbird was finally published on July 11, 1960. Within weeks, it hit the bestseller list across the country. I was stunned. AC wrote that everybody in town was claiming that I was their best friend, and the phone was ringing off the hook with people congratulating him. Of course, he claimed he always knew I had talent. The reviews were glorious. Suddenly, I was an A-list New York author who was invited to a lot of fancy parties. I met famous writers like Lillian Hellman and Carson McCullers. To my face, they praised my writing, although I once overheard Carson say, "She's drinking from my literary well." I was deluged with fan mail. One reader wrote, "I named my baby Atticus after the father in your book." Another said, This book changed my life. Lippincott sent me on a book tour across the whole country. I did hundreds of interviews, although I don't usually like that kind of thing. I remember this one I did in Chicago. Miss Lee, what will happen when your book is published down south? My publisher says not to worry, nobody down there can read. One of your sisters is a lawyer. Is she a criminal lawyer? No, she's not a criminal. With all the royalties, you must be getting pretty rich. Not rich. You know that space program we have? I'm paying for it. 95% of my earnings disappeared in taxes. Miss Lee, what do you think of Governor Ross Barnett's decision not to abide by the federal law on integration? I presume a man is innocent until proven guilty. However, I presume he'll be proven guilty. I think he's wrong. Well, success spoiled Harper Lee. She's too old. Don't some people think the name Harper Lee belongs to a man? Yes. In fact, I was recently invited to speak at Yale, and I was told I could stay in the men's dormitory. I declined that part of the invitation with reluctance. Then, in 1966, In Cold Blood was published. I was shocked to see Truman had taken my name off of it. The most I got was a dedication to NHL with love and gratitude, which I had to share with his boyfriend, Jack Dunphy. I called him, "You backstabbing little bastard, why?" "Now, you don't need this book now. That's not the point. I wrote a lot of it. And I wrote a lot of Mockingbird." That is a total lie, and you know it. You never even read it till right before it was published. Well, you used my life in it. You never told me not to. And I never told you that I would put your name on my book. That is a goddamn lie. You think I dragged myself out there to the outback of Kansas as a personal favor? Now, calm down. Let me have my moment in the sun. Truman, you've had many moments in the sun. Do what's right. It's too late. Go to hell, you lying two-faced son of a bitch. Truman and I never spoke again. But by that time he was drinking a lot. So, Sarah, that's all I can tell you. Not much of a story, I'm afraid. Time to take my pills. Well, honey, tell your grandma hello for me and give her a big hug. Goodbye, child. What? No, I never wrote another book. I was a one-trick pony. What did your grandma say? Well, how would she know a thing like that? I don't recall letting her read it. All right. Years ago, I did write a kind of postscript to Mockingbird, but I never did anything with it. She said Mockingbird wasn't the whole truth. Well, she's right about that. The postscript was my attempt to set the record straight. No, child, I don't want to talk about it. It's ancient history. Stop pestering me, child. I said no. Really? She thought the postscript was better than Mockingbird? Well, are you sure you want to hear this? because I'm warning you. If you liked Mockingbird, what I'm going to tell you might shock you, might even upset you. All right then. It goes, but don't say I didn't warn you. It was about what happened in the summer of 1954. That's when I finally took a vacation from New York and went back home to Monroeville. After my mother had passed away a few years before, so it was just my father and Alice there now. After living in New York City, I was going stir crazy in that old town. The Supreme Court had recently ruled in Brown versus the Board of Education that segregation was illegal. They ordered integration in every school in the US. Things were different here now, especially when Hattie Bell's grandson was involved in a traffic accident where a white man was killed. He was arrested. That night, AC said, "I'll defend the boy." I hugged him. I knew you'd want to help. Of course, we don't want those NAACP lawyers getting their hands on this. What are you talking about? Oh, they drag it through the courts for years. Best to get it over with quickly. But why? He shook his head and left the room. I went to see Hattie Bell. She wasn't working for AC anymore, and she had pretty bad arthritis. She was just sitting in a rocking chair in her house when I got there. Her face was covered with lines. AC will help him, I told her. She shook her head and sighed. Her whole manner was formal, like I was a stranger. Well, you go to jail with or without Mr. Lee. I took her hands. Hattie Bell, I want to do what I can. She frowned. Nothing can be done. She pulled away from me. Hattie Bell, I'm so sorry. Do you hate me? Please don't pull away. Child, what are you all doing to us? What are you all doing to my people? I backed out of the room slowly, without even hugging her or saying goodbye. A local man named Bill that I went to high school with came to call on me. He took the seat AC was saving for me at the law office. We went swimming together, just having fun, until one day he kissed me and he told me he loved me. I liked him well enough. Well, maybe even more than liked him. One day he sat me down. "Now, come back here and marry me. I can afford a nice house and we could settle down. You could still ride if you want to, but I would look after you now." I thought about it. New York was hard. I'd already rewritten my book twice and Tay said to try again. I told Bill, "Let me think about it." A few days later, I was cleaning up AC's desk at home when I came across a pamphlet entitled "The Black Curse." It had a picture of a scary-looking black man on the cover with horns on his head. I sat down and read it. There was a lot of garbage about Negroes being an inferior race. It disgusted me. I tore it up and threw it in the garbage. I told myself, probably came in the mail and AC forgot to throw it out. Still, it worried me. What was AC doing with a thing like that? I found out a few days later. Bill came to call on AC and they talked about going to some meeting together at the courthouse. They acted kind of strange about it. So when they left, I decided to follow them. The courthouse was already surrounded by a sea of people when I sneaked into the colored balcony. As I looked down on the scene below, I couldn't believe my eyes. There were AC and Bill with Mr. Jennings, the man AC ordered out of Truman's Halloween party. Another man got up to speak. They're the scum of the earth. They're lower than cockroaches. It's all part of a communist plot to mongrelize the races. Do you want them marrying your daughter? Do you want them going to the same schools as your children? The crowd shouted no. I looked down. And I saw that my father was one of them. I stumbled out of the courthouse, my stomach heaving. I lost its contents behind a bush. I somehow made it home, but I didn't eat dinner that night. I just went to my room, but I didn't sleep. I sat up all night long, going over and over what I had seen, over and over all night long. I finally fell asleep around dawn. When I got up, AC was gone. I dressed quickly and hurried down to the court to his office. I was gonna have it out with him. Bill was sitting at the front desk when I walked in the door. He stood up and held out his arms to me. Oh, darling, drop dead, I hissed. Well, what's wrong? The meeting last night? Well, you were there? Yes, and I wouldn't marry you if you were the last man alive. I pushed past him and barged into AC's office. I saw you at that meeting. How could you? Now, Nell, calm down. You don't know what it's like living here now with the NAACP stirring up trouble. No, I will not calm down. And the NAACP isn't stirring up trouble. They're doing what's right. You are so naive. They are trying to destroy our way of life. Huh. I don't know you, AC. You brought me up to respect all people, but you never bothered to tell me we were better than some if their skin happened to be black. You are a hypocrite and an unbelievably disgusting bigot. When I heard you talk about Hannibal's grandson the other day, I was appalled. I mean, after all she's done for us, being like a mother to me, raising me right, you see her and her family as a bunch of ignorant, no-account Negroes, don't you? That's not true. Hattie Bell was good to you, I know. I thought you believed all men were created equal, but you didn't defend that black man years ago because you thought that you were just doing your duty as a lawyer. Now you're thinking like a New Yorker. Why didn't you bring me up to be some sweet little Southern belle who drank big juleps and married her own kind and gave you Basil and grandchildren? Why did you teach me what's right and then betray that so unforgivably? Stop. No, I will not stop. You are my hero. I idolized you. I thought I could always depend on you. That is why this is so shocking, so completely devastating. Now they're like children. Well, if they are, it's because we've made them that way. We've kept them down. We've destroyed their self-respect. Men like you have destroyed their self-respect. You've killed them. And what you've done is worse than Hitler. You're exaggerating. Didn't you once say you thought integration wouldn't work? No, AC, I said it would take time. We have to go slowly. Well, you're right about that, but I doubt it will ever work. even if it is the law of the land. No, you're talking about going against the law, and you're a lawyer. Well, guess what, AC? I was born without a color, and I don't notice it in other people, including Hattie Bell. You were my hero. But now, I see you're just like all the rest of them, a nice old Southern gentleman who wants to preserve the status quo. Well, face this, AC. Your daughter's a nigger lover, and I will hate you forever for betraying me. You duplicitous, smooth-talking, lying, racist son of a bitch. I ran out of his office, and I took the next bus out of there back to New York City. All the way back, I wrote up what had just happened in my notebook. I would put it in the book I was writing, and if it were ever published, people would see what kind of man my father really was, what he had done. He would be publicly humiliated. When I got back, I typed up what I had written, and I added it to the book I already had and dropped it off at Kay's office. She called me in a week later. Now, it's excellent writing, but you have to take out the present day stuff. Just make it about your childhood. Let Atticus remain a hero. He's a wonderful character. You can't turn him from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde. It would ruin the beautiful story you've created. This is a novel, not real life. Look, put the pages away for safekeeping. You've more than enough for another book. You could publish it another time after your father is gone. Now, you've written a great book. Lippincott bought the rights. I'm telling you, it has to be that way. Fine, I'll find another publisher. Well, good luck with that. You're a complete unknown. I can do it. Now, in all my years of publishing, I've never read a book with so much promise. That's why I can't let you add this present day stuff. Mockingbird more than stands on its own. Listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. Now, I understand that you are upset with your father, but you need to work these feelings out elsewhere, not in print. I can give you the name of an excellent psychiatrist. God damn it, Kay. I'm not crazy. AC is a yellow-bellied racist, and I want the world to know. I'll hold him up to public ridicule. They can see how wrong he is. If you're not willing to cut that part, Lippincott will not publish To Kill a Mockingbird. Oh, go to hell, Tay. You're asking me to turn it into, you know how much I want this book published, but you're asking me to turn it into some sweet little children's story when I know it can be so much more. Those are my terms. Yeah, well, your terms make me sick. This whole publishing house makes me sick. Take it or leave it. What choice did I have? I know I could have told her no and tried to find another publisher. Maybe I sold out. But, you know, I desperately wanted the book published, even the sanitized version of it. So I put the pages away for safekeeping and tried to forget about it. Eventually, I spoke to AC again, but things were never the same between us. I was polite but distant. He knew why. He wasn't my hero anymore. He was just a man. Then in 1961, I won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, and the book was sold to the movies for a lot of money. I thought that Spencer Tracy would be perfect for the role of Atticus, but he turned us down, and the part went to Gregory Peck. I could hardly keep my feet on the ground when he arrived in Monroeville to meet my father and do research for his part. We became good friends. I was on the set every day, even though Horton Foote wrote the screenplay. I came to see that the role of Atticus gave Gregory Peck a chance to play himself. He spent hours interviewing my father, studying his mannerisms. He told me what a fine man AC was. I didn't say anything. AC was so excited about the book. I tried to forget what I knew about him. I felt guilty. My father became a hero to millions. AC Lee, the man who didn't want blacks in the schools. He died before we got to see the movie and got to see Greg win an Oscar for playing him. I gave Greg AC's watch. He was so grateful. He thought it was so generous. I wasn't. I didn't want anything else to do with my father. Our book was the best, was only part of the story. The best part. More awards and accolades follows. I tried to accept all the praise, but it made me very uncomfortable. I tried to write another book. It just didn't happen. Maybe it was all the betrayals. First Truman, then my father. I was trapped in a lie. I couldn't write another word. I didn't have to. Mockingbird made me wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. President Johnson asked me to be on the National Council for the Arts. So I decided to just be an ordinary person, get out of the spotlight, and fade away. Yeah, that's what I did for almost 50 years until yesterday. Sotheby's wanted the original manuscript to Kill a Mockingbird, so I gave my lawyer the key to my safe deposit box. When she opened it, she found this. It's my long lost book, Go Set a Watchman. Yeah, that's something. Now I gotta decide what to do with it. What would you do, Sarah? I know you're little more than a child. Let's call your grandma and ask her, what's her number? What did you say? You just told me she's doing well. I bet she'd love to talk to me. I haven't talked to her in ages. She'd be so tickled to know they found my book. She always told me I should do something with it. Maybe she'd even like to read it again. Just give me her number. What do you mean you don't have it? How could you not have your own? She's deaf. No, wait. You told me she was given music lessons. Oh, I get it. You're not Sylvia's granddaughter, are you? Who are you? You tell me right this minute. Danielle. Where are you from, Danielle? The New York Times. Oh my God, you rotten little liar. I knew there was something fishy about you. I should never have told you all that stuff. I don't do interviews. I haven't done one in 50 years. Oh, you're sorry. Yeah, well, it's a little late for that. You came in here under false pretenses. Now, the public does not have a right to know anything. Do you hand over those notes before I sue you and I sue the New York Times? You're gonna be sorry you ever came in here pretending to be some fledgling writer when all you really wanted was a scoop. Get out of here. There's the door. another question. Do I want it published? You get out of here right now or I'll call the cops. Go on deck. Get out of here. Some nerve. Good riddance. Do I want it published? Do I want it published? Do I want it published? You bet your sweet lying ass I do.
Bravo.
I didn't